During World War II, the Eastern Front was primarily fought between the Germans and the Soviets. However, there were other Axis and Allied belligerents. Today's video is about the Italian Expeditionary Corps in Russia, which is separate from the Italian Army in Russia, which will be a video on its own later. Anyway, the Italian Expeditionary Corps in Russia was created to provide a somewhat mobile unit to the fight on a front where mobility was key. Two of the divisions were truck movable and one was designated as a fast division, drawn from the Reserve Army of the Po, but this was more on paper than in reality. They were also formed to show solidarity with Nazi Germany after Operation Barbarossa. The Corps was formed on July 10th, despite the lack of enthusiasm shown by Hitler, and between the months of July and August, the units of the Italian force arrived in southern Russia. The Corps also included an aviation command with a limited number of fighters, bombers, and transport aircraft, which was part of the Italian Royal Air Force and was known as the Expeditionary Air Corps in Russia. The Italians were initially subordinate to the German 11th Army on August 14th, and the Corps was transferred to the control of the German Panzer Group 1. The Italians remained under von Kleist's command until June 3, 1942, when it was subordinate to the German 17th Army. The Italians would mostly be led by Major General Messe until November 1, 1942. The composition of the Expeditionary Corps included three divisions, being the 3rd Cavalry Division, the 9th Infantry Division, and the 52nd Division. The infantry divisions were semi-motorized with an assortment of commercial vehicles, including company logos intact, that were pressed into service. Meanwhile, the cavalry was a combination of traditional saber-wielding horse cavalry and motorized units, with much of the division's artillery being horse-drawn. The highly mobile riflemen, known as bersaglieri, were also in this unit and made use of motorcycles and bicycles. The initial strength of the Corps stood at roughly 3,000 officers and 59,000 men, 5,500 motor vehicles, 220 artillery pieces, 92 anti-tank guns, 83 airplanes, and 4,600 horses and mules. Although the units of the expedition were primarily lightly armed infantry, horse cavalry, and mobile riflemen, there would also be 60 light tanks, which could not effectively combat Soviet tanks like the T-34. The Italians' first contact with the Red Army came on August of 1941, where they pushed and pursued retreating Soviet troops between the Bug River and Dniester River. While the 11th Army conducted the siege of Odessa, the Italian troops would provide aerial support. In their early Soviet encounters, the Italians were quite successful, taking a number of towns and cities and creating a favorable impression on their German allies. Their most notable early victory came at the Battle of Petrikov on September of 1941, where the Italians would encircle a very sizable Red Army unit, inflicting an unknown number of casualties on them while capturing over 10,000 prisoners as well as a significant number of weapons and horses. This battle would end up costing the Italians 291 casualties, being 87 killed, 190 wounded, and 14 missing. On October 20th, the Corps and the German Mountain Corps captured a big industrial city of Stalino after a determined resistance from Soviet defenders. Units from the Italian motorized divisions captured the neighboring city of Gorlovka, an industrial town with around 100,000 inhabitants, on November 2nd. While the Italian ground troops would not participate in the siege of Odessa, Italian troops would assist in the occupation of the area after the city fell on October 16, 1941. As winter set in, the Italians started consolidating their occupation zones and preparing defensive works. In the last week of December, the 3rd Mobile Infantry Division was counterattacked by Soviet forces and would manage to repel every attack long enough for the 1st Panzer Army to reinforce their sectors of defense and defeat the Soviet attacks. The so-called Christmas battle would be hailed as a great victory in Italy, although the division likely would have fallen without German support. Next would be the charge of the Savoya Caviieria at Izbushensky, which was a clash between the Italian Cavalry Regiment and the Soviet 812th Rifle Regiment, which took place on August 24, 1942, near the hamlet of Izbushensky, close to the junction between the Don River. Though a minor skirmish in the theater of the Eastern Front, this charge had a great propaganda resonance in Italy and is still remembered as one of the last significant cavalry charges in history, as cavalry and horse-mounted Italian troops would easily defeat the Soviet infantry. In July of 1942, the Italian Expeditionary Corps would be incorporated into the far larger Italian army in Russia, and Spaghetti Mussolini decided to expand the Italian presence in the Eastern Front and fight in the Soviet Union. The three divisions all then became part of the Italian army in Russia, and don't worry, I'll be doing a video on them at some point looking forward. With all of that, did you know about the Italian Expeditionary Corps in Russia before this video? Write in the comments, and thank you for watching.